Hello and welcome, my name's Andrew and today I'm working on this 2012 VW Tiguan. It's done about 90,000 miles. It's a 2-litre 4Motion with a DSG transmission. Not that that particularly matters for what we're doing today. So it's just failed its MOT. For those of you not familiar or watching outside the UK, MOT stands for Ministry of Transport and it's a test that vehicles over 3 years old have to have every year to check basic things like roadworthiness and that sort of thing. It is not a substitute for a service, and I see that mentioned quite a lot on various forums and stuff. But in this case it spotted something that I didn't spot, which is a broken spring. Jack the car up on the side with the broken spring, but I'm going to replace both sides because these things should be repaired. It should be replaced in pairs. I'm using, can you see that there? No, you can't. So I've had to buy a new tool for this job, which is obviously a great pleasure, buying new tools. Surprisingly, I don't know how I've managed to avoid it, but I haven't actually had to replace a spring before on any of the vehicles I've owned or worked on. I'm not sure how that's happened, but anyway, I haven't. Right, here we go. Here's the offending article. It's quite hard to spot. I don't know if you can see it. I might just take a picture of it actually, that might be a bit easier. Anyway, the traditional spring compressors where you put one on each side and then tighten them down gradually together wouldn't really fit on this vehicle, I don't think. There isn't really space. So, got myself one of these. Not usually a huge fan of Draper tools, I've got to say, but this seemed to be a reasonable price and seemed to have fairly good reviews, so I took a punt on this one. I'll just open it up and show you what you get, although it's fairly clear from the cardboard on the outside. While we're here, actually, you might be able to tell the rubber spring pad in the bottom of the spring pan there has actually moved slightly. It has got a little locating piece that goes through a hole in the bottom of the spring pan, and that's actually been pulled back through, so hopefully we're going to be able to get that one in position rather than having to order a new one, because I didn't order a new one, I just ordered the replacement springs. The other thing to pay attention to for the uninitiated is these little coloured blobs on the spring. VW, bless them, there's I haven't got a clue how many different springs there are for this vehicle, but there's a lot of different ones, so make sure you get the right one. You can look up online the part number, the VW part number that matches up with these coloured blobs, and then that enables you to find the correct aftermarket part should you not wish to pay VW prices, which I didn't. So the spring I've got is a KYB RA6166. Right, here we go then. So the main compression bar, 3 different sizes of pad for different sizes of spring. Looking at this one, so by diameter of the spring, that small one is fine, but the spring no, it's not actually, it's too small on diameter as well. So medium sized one. So these two, they screw into this. Comes with an adapter to stand off one of these if you are changing conical springs, but these aren't, these are straight, so we'll just use these two on this and hopefully we'll be able to get it changed. I say we, I always say we, I don't know why. it's just me. There's no one else behind me helping me out. So yeah, if I say we and you think, well, where's the other person? That's just an idiosyncrasy of the way I speak. Comes with some bolts to bolt these onto this, and an Allen key as well, should you need it. I've got far too many of those loitering in my toolboxes anyway. I was absolutely convinced that was a 4, but it's not, it's a 5. Make sure they're good and tight. The other thing I'm going to do as well is apply some extra lubricant to the thread. Okay, there you go, the spring compressor is installed. Now it's just a case of gradually tightening it up. Unfortunately, I am going to have to do that with an adjustable spanner because the only 21mm socket I have is too long when it's on the ratchet to fit under the bottom there. So that's another tool to buy. Obviously that's an excuse to buy a short 21mm socket, which I thought I had but I didn't. So gradually tighten it up with the adjustable spanner. I'll do a little bit of that, but there's not really space for you and me under here. So you can see as you turn, it's gradually compressing that spring until hopefully it will lift out of its mount at the top. This obviously would be a lot quicker with a power tool, but while I'm learning how this tool works and stuff, I'd rather do it by hand. And every time you hear a little ping like that, you just think, oh way up, what's going on? Just checking that the spring is seated inside those raised up areas, which it is. Right, I didn't take enough coils of spring in there because those bolts are about touching and we've not compressed it enough. So we'll reposition, start again. Right, here we are again, set up. It was a bit tricky because the back edge of this lower pan is catching on the lower arm here. So what I had to do basically was use a pry bar to lever the underside of this lower cup upwards, just to bend the spring a little bit. So that would allow it to go backwards so that the spring can seat properly in these cups. Let's go again, shall we? Plus the extra bit. That's what I was talking about before, that little lug. There's a corresponding hole in the bottom there. I'm just going to leave that in place so I know how I'm putting the new spring back in. Just making sure that's going to be in about the right place. I think it is. A Spitfire going overhead for those of you interested. Just going to put a little bit of grease down these edges, which will mean that I'll get it all over my hands, but they do just seem to be catching slightly, so it would probably be a good idea. I've actually had to compress the spring. I had to take another turn of spring into the compressor. I hope that means I'll be able to get the compressor out. Okay, so the spring's in. I now have the fight of getting the tool out. Because I'm working on my own, I don't have the benefit of someone assisting me by pressing this whole suspension arm down as much as possible. So I chose to add an extra turn of spring into the compressor to make it easier for me to get in. However, the flip side of doing that is that I now have a slightly harder job of getting this lower pan out because it's partially trapped. So the compressor is loose. What I've decided to try and do is to take the pans, most of the tool in the upper spring pan out of the way. In the hope that I will then be able to get everything out. We'll soon see. Well, I say soon, depends on how much more time I spend. Okay, one shiny new spring seated correctly. I've got the compressor tool out. Ended up having to separate the metal horseshoe from the plastic horseshoe, just reduce the thickness a little bit, and then I could spin it round past that bolt and take it out. Not the slickest way of doing this job. I think if I was doing it again, or when I do the other side I will, I might compress the spring with one less turn and just try and do a bit more levering of the arm to get it into place, because I think that might end up being a bit quicker. Okay, some progress here. Clearly I'm doing the other side now. I have taken in one less turn on the new spring to compress it to enable me to get the tool out more easily. What I did this time, two things differently. First is put the pad on first and then the spring, not try and put them on together. And the second thing is twist the spring a lot more so we're not right on the highest point where we're trying to slide it in. So now I can twist it back so that the bottom end of the spring is correctly seated in its pad at the bottom, and then I can take the pressure off. Basically I was doing this by getting the bottom in first, putting it in twisted as I've described, and then putting my foot on here, pressing the suspension down as far as possible, and just about managed to get it in. Just checking that the spring's still correctly seated as I let off the tension. Love it when it does that, just to keep me on my toes. I've lubricated it quite a lot, like each time I've used it. I haven't always done it on camera, but I've added extra lubricant to it. But it still has that lovely little habit, only at the top of the travel. Right, that's it, all done. Thank you for joining me on this journey of changing the springs on this 2012 Tiguan. A bit disappointed that they needed doing actually, because it's only 8 years old and it's only done 90,000 miles, which doesn't seem like much to me. I've got a 12-year-old Audi A3 that's done 170,000 miles and the springs on that are all fine, but I suppose, you know, you can't know the size of bump that the car's been over, or the sort of clout that it's got that might have just finished that spring off. Anyway, that's how you change the springs. I hope it was helpful. The first side I did, as is often the case when you're doing a job for the first time, or it is with me anyway, it took a little bit longer than I'd have anticipated. Wasn't particularly slick. I suppose it's a case of learning how to use the spring compressor tool, and just learning about how it all goes really. So the things that I did differently on the second side, which made it a lot easier, were to put the spring pad in at the top first and then put the spring in afterwards, rather than put the spring pad on the spring and then try and fit the whole thing in one go like that. Twisting the spring as well, so that we weren't trying to push the highest point of the spring in at the top, actually trying to push it in where slightly further round the coil, where it's slightly lower height, so it would ease in a bit more easily. The other thing I suppose that happened was that I was able to be a bit more aggressive with the pry bar and just sort of forcing the spring into place, and also managed to work out the best way of standing on the brake disc, or applying as much of my weight as I could to the brake disc, while also then levering the spring into position. And I suppose that's something that just comes with practice. If I had someone else here to help me, that would have been a whole lot easier, because they could have been standing on that disc with all their weight, and then I would have been able to be in a much better position to just slot the spring in. The other thing that made it quicker on the second side was not trying to compress too many turns of the spring. So I think I had 4 turns of the spring in for the second side. I tried to do it on the first side, on this side, with 5 turns, and that meant that the lower horseshoe section was got trapped, and so that delayed things a little bit. Anyway, hope it helps. Hope my learning points will be useful for you, so that when you start doing this, you'll be able to be as quick as I was on the second one with your first one. The spring compressor, pretty good. Got the job done. You might have heard me, or heard it just sort of getting bound up and then slipping, which is a little bit unnerving when you're already a bit nervous about something giving way and a spring flying towards your face when you're using it. But not bad. It's got plenty of battle scars now. You can see around here the metal's been worn away. On the back there, I don't know whether I got a bit of grit stuck in it or whether there was something inside there, but that's also got a bit scratched up. Anyway, it did the job. It's pretty good. Important to keep it well lubricated, I think, to minimise it binding up and those unnerving bangs and stuff as it gradually gives way. But yeah, it worked pretty well. Fairly pleased with it. Probably not the best example of this tool, but then also not the most expensive either. And because I don't really do this type of work every day, I didn't really feel it was worth spending a whole lot more to get something of a potentially better build quality. So there you go. So I hope this was useful for you. If it was, please consider subscribing so you get to find out about more videos as I publish them. For now, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.